Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
the podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
And you want a quality education that challenges you and stretches you to reach your full potential. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent. And it is Thursday, April 17th, and welcome to episode number 64, The Importance of College-Specific Essays. In this week's news, Embattled colleges focus on an obvious fix, helping students graduate on time. And we're in chapter 64 of 171 answers, and we're talking about what admissions counselors look for in college-specific essays. And this week's question asks about the new no-enrollment online options from certain schools. And Mark wraps up his interview with Georgia State University senior student, Miss Ann Jean, and the final part of how to know if you're on the right career path.
Anika, I have some exciting news, and I intentionally didn't tell you before now because I wanted to get your live reaction on air.
Oh.
But my youngest daughter, Joy, is going to be a Bulldog. She was accepted to the University of Georgia, and she's going next year.
Wow,
Yeah,
congratulations. That's awesome.
Really happy for her. Really happy for her. We all think it's a really good match, and her sister, her mother, we all think it's great. So super excited for her. But I'm going to tell her, I always pull for Georgia Tech when Georgia plays Georgia Tech, and I'm still pulling for Georgia Tech. I'm still a Yellow Jacket. Sorry,
you dare
Bulldog
say
fan.
that out loud?
Yes. Now for some bad news, and it's kind of college related. So, Anika, you remember last week how I was all chesty, all talking trash about my Michigan State Spartans?
Of course.
How they're gonna win the national title, and how they took down Duke. Well, not only did we get drubbed by Texas Tech the next game, and I thought about it, braggadocious. And, my dad's favorite scripture verse is pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 16:18. I just have him like that voice like ringing in my ear, but it gets worse because you remember how I expressed contempt and disdain for Duke. Even said how we called him puke growing up. Remember all that?
I do.
So, I was at this conference of college admissions counselors this week for 3 full days, just like admissions heaven. 400 admissions counselors, 400 college counselors. We all meet together for 3 days and we talk and everything. So I'm at the conference and one of the admissions counselors I know from Duke University comes up and he's like, no, he comes up to me and he's like, Mark, I really enjoy your podcast. I listen to it when I'm traveling on the road recruiting. And yes, he did. Yes, he did. And my heart is pounding. And I'm like, please don't listen to the one where I called you puke. Please don't listen to the one where I called you puke.
See, that's what you get. That's
exactly what I get. It's like God has a sense of humor or what? That is a good. But I just need to clarify. This is not me trying to assuage my guilt. I actually really do like Duke University as a place for students to go to. I really do. I love this school. No, I'm not just saying this, but I don't like front runners. I don't like media darlings. I pull for the underdog. That's why I pull for Georgia Tech against Georgia. So just to get that out there, I don't want people to think I hate Duke. It's just the media darling scene. So anyway, what it tells us, Anika, we got to be careful about what we say on this podcast. Got to be careful.
You do.
Yeah, I do. Let me speak for me and not you. Oh, boy.
Not my world, but okay.
Exactly. All right. Let's go back. We're doing shout outs to people. And so I really want to give a shout out to subscribers. And let me tell you why. So, Anika, we hired Evo as a consultant when we started the podcast to give us guidance. And so I reached out to Evo like a month ago. He's this podcast guru who Anika and I worked with when we launched. And I reached out to him like a month ago and I was like, Evo, what determines what podcast comes up when someone does a search? Because like 80% of the people who find us say they found us like by doing a search, like on Apple Podcasts, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I was like, Evo, is it based on your reviews, which I thought it probably was, right? And he's like, no. And I was like, is it based on like your number of listeners or downloads? He was like, no. I'm like, well, what is it? Yeah, what is it? And he was like, it's 2 things. It's longevity. Well, we can't control that, right? We've been around 14 months. It is what it is. It's how long and he said it's subscribers. So, so the shout out
nice.
is to everybody who subscribes because you're helping other people find the show. Isn't that
Awesome.
cool? And for those who haven't
It's very
subscribed,
cool.
it's kind of a big hint. Subscribe, everybody.
Please. Thank you.
And the last thing I want to say before we kick our show off today is Dr. Geetha. She's one of our regular listeners, and she reached out to us, and she's like, Mark and Anika, tell everybody about your podcast. So I responded back. I'm like, well, would you like some postcards to hand out? And she was like, sure, I would love that. And so it gave us a really good idea, which is if any of you like just love this podcast and you want to introduce it to your friends, your family, maybe your school, your place of worship, your boys club, whatever networks you're in, all you have to do is shoot us an email at questions@yourcollegeboundkid and just say like, send me 25, 50 or 100. Just put 25, 50 or 100 and we'll get a batch of postcards out and you can spread the word and each one can reach one.
That's right.
Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
Okay, Mark, this week's article. It is entitled Embattled Colleges Focus on an Obvious Fix, Helping Students Graduate on Time. And this is written by, I always mess this up. Is it the Hechinger Report, Mark?
Like what the heck?
Hechinger Report. What the heck?
Yeah,
what
there
the
you
heck,
go. What the heck?
Written by Mr. Jon Marcus. And the way it starts off is that while most students expect to earn degrees in 4 years, fewer than half actually do. And so, Mark, I have to tell you that I automatically think of, the reason why this happens is because of finances. I always just assume that finances is the reason why kids don't graduate on time. But this article goes on to highlight others that I just wouldn't have thought of otherwise. But I don't want to go into the list yet, but let's talk about the reason why that Mr. Marcus points this out. So these schools are stepping up, and I think he points out the University of Washington as an example on why they're addressing the issue of 4-year graduation rates. Now, is it because they care about the students? Well, sure, probably. But Mark, as you and I have talked about several times before, is that these schools are businesses and they need to act accordingly. So what they should, yes, they can care about the students. We trust they care about the students, but they're mostly concerned about these students who are going beyond the 4 years because a few things, like what he points out is that they're using up their school state subsidies. They're using up financial aid and housing. And what's really critical for them is that, oftentimes these state budgets are crafted by our legislators based on the number of students the schools are graduating on time. So, of course, they need to be concerned about that, right? And again, Mark, I'll let you guide us into the reasons why these kids are going beyond the 4 years. But my first question would be if the schools on Janae's list are putting forth these efforts, as University of Washington is, and if they're seeing the kind of results that they're seeing. And of course, I get the special feeling that some of these schools have bigger hurdles than others.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the article goes on to say that 1 out of 3 schools are not having that same success.
Mm-hmm.
So why, and who, and where, and what's going on?
Let me just set the table with the why, who, and where, and when, and everything, right? So, all right. So let me say this. Before the global financial crisis in 2008, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, Anika, the prevailing mindset that just existed really in society, certainly middle-class society for sure, was just go get a college degree. It's your ticket to the American dream. It's your ticket to a better life. And that largely really went unquestioned. But then you had a confluence of a couple of things. You have record-breaking student loan debt, record-breaking parent loan debt, coupled with far too many students living in their parents' basement, not gainfully employed. And what that did is it led to serious inquiry and serious dissection and examination, and in some cases even skepticism about whether college degree is even worth it anymore. And so that led to all of these studies. And basically, if I was to summarize up most people's views, is this: the college degree is absolutely worth it, but you better graduate, which led to the focus on to graduation. And then when you start looking at graduation numbers, you see how abysmal they are. So here's a quote from the article. While 86% of incoming freshmen said in an annual national survey conducted by Research Institute at UCLA that they were confident that they would graduate in 4 years, only 41% at public schools and 61% at private schools actually do graduate in 4 years. And that's based on voluminous amounts of research done by the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center, which tracks this stuff. So basically, higher ed is under tremendous pressure to fix these abysmal low graduation rates and to fix them ASAP. And where's the pressure coming from? Well, it's coming from really everywhere. It's coming from parents who are tired of this loan debt. And not even if it's just loan debt, even if you're not taking out loans, even if you're dropping $250,000, whatever you're paying, you want your kid graduating.
Right.
Pressure's coming from students who are questioning the value and wanting to know what the ROI is. Here's the thing, Anika, pressure's coming from employers and it's coming from state legislatures. And some of the state legislatures are saying, basically, get your act together or we will cut off your funding, or at least substantially reducing your funding. In fact, it says in the article, and legislatures are increasingly tying public universities' budgets to the proportion of their students who graduate on time. And here's another quote. Parents are shouldering more of the tuition, and there's really a focus on return on investment. Employers are also pushing, and students are pushing to finish in 4 years. So that's setting the whole table. And then I think the article starts out by talking about why graduation rates are so low. And you're absolutely right, Anika, that no question money is one reason, definitely a reason. It's a big reason, but it's not the only one. Do you recall any other reasons that were brought on in the article?
I do.
Why don't you mention some of them, and then I'll share some.
Okay, so the first one that was interesting to me is most interesting was about classes that became full too fast. Like required major classes, like a kid goes, gets accepted into this college, and all of a sudden they can't get into the classes that they're required to take.
That's very common.
So that sets them back. Yeah, I thought that was shocking. And I'll tell you that the next one lining up for me was one as simple as this, where the kid doesn't even know that they have a graduation application that they have to submit, and they miss a deadline, and so then, oh my God, they don't graduate. How ridiculous is that? And let me give you one more, Mark. Not taking, and I know you've talked, and I'm sure you're going to talk about this more, but not taking enough credits per semester.
That's huge.
And that's interesting to me because, that's the reason why they have these advisors in place, is to help you with that kind of stuff. So that relationship with that advisor needs to be strong, because there's no reason why you have the support person paid to be there to help you get through this stuff and you're not taking enough credits. So those were the most shocking to me.
Well, you hit the main ones. I'll read just a couple quotes from the article that comment on what you said. So in talking about the requirements for the major, the article says this: no one really tells you that this was a requirement, said Driscoll, whose roommate fortuitously mentioned it. It doesn't need to be this complicated. William's friend and fellow sophomore James Poirier, who will take longer than 4 years to finish because he didn't take enough Spanish in high school to meet UW's language requirement, even though he's majoring in biology. So some of these sort of esoteric and arcane type requirements that schools have that you don't even know about, which you commented on. And then the other thing you commented on.
But Mark, wait, before you do that, can we digress into that a little bit?
No,
I don't want to get off topic.
I can tell you got some passion bubbling up.
Well, how is this kid getting into a school if he hadn't met the requirements to get accepted into the school? Well, I thought that was like, wait, what?
Yeah, so my understanding was that they were saying, okay, it's UW's language requirement, not for admission into the college, but admission to graduate. In other words, a school can say, look, everybody has to have taken some foreign language in college, and they'll give you a waiver if you took it in high school.
Okay.
Right. But he didn't. So he doesn't take it in high school.
Okay.
It's not part of his major requirements, but it's part of the overall university requirements.
Okay. Refocus.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, and here's another great quote on what you mentioned on the 12 credits. In his previous jobs on campus, said Elston, he would ask at freshman orientation, how many students plan to take more than 12 credits per semester? Check this out. Only a tenth, 1 in 10, would raise their hand. 1 in 10 that they plan to take, because 12 is considered full-time. Some people are blinking full-time. Then he'd ask, how many expected to graduate in 4 years? And every hand would go up. No one ever spelled it out to them that if they only take 12 credits, you're already automatically on the 5-year plan. All right. So that's remember, Anika, once before we talked about this 15 to finish movement that was focusing on taking 15 credits every semester so you could graduate in 4 years. I was like almost a year ago. Yeah. So that's another one. So you really hit the main ones in the article. The only other one that they commented on was constantly switching majors. Right? Like, you switch your major because 80% of students do switch. But when you switch, then you get new requirements that pop up. And that's kind of really tough because, I mean, I was just talking to a parent this week and she said, I think it's totally unfair for a college to expect an 18-year-old to know what they want to do. So that's kind of a tough one. The good news is that a number of universities are stepping up to the plate. Here in Georgia, like Georgia State has won all kinds of awards for how they've beefed up their graduation rates by doing a number of things. This article focuses on University of Washington and some of the really good things they are doing through the internet. They're able to notice and spot someone who's not on pace much earlier, and they're proactively intervening and calling the person in and to talk to them. Because before it used to be a whole paper system. Now they can just go online and see where you're at, and it's much easier to catch it. And they're proactively intervening. They've also beefed up the number of advisors that they've hired, which are really important, right? Because that's your one-on-one. And then they're assigning students to advisors even before they start as a freshman, which is great. So, right from the time you're mid in the summer, you start working with your advisor about planning and all that. So that's great. They've also expanded the capacity for high demand courses because it addresses the issue you said. One of the reasons why you weren't able to take classes because they were filling up. So simple solution, right? Just open up more space. So they've put more lectures in online. They've added teaching assistants and they've added courses so that students won't run into the scenario where they say, well, I got to stay another semester because I need whatever it is, right? Organic chemistry, and it's not offered until it's full or whatever, right? So they've addressed that. And the other thing they're doing is they're giving priority to students who need to take certain courses for their major. So that, like, if Janaea was taking a course just as an elective, she can't bump out the person that has to have it, for their major. And then they're also, doing some other things too, just to overcome the social isolation that some first year students experience by having more first year seminars, which are like really small learning environments where it's hard to fall through the cracks. Kind of what you get at an expensive private school, but taking that to the public school. And so, and then they created a video called U101 for incoming freshmen, which kind of goes over all these things and more. And 87% of students in a survey said it helps them feel more connected to the university. So they've done all this stuff. They're emphasizing the 15 credit hours, not 12. And they've been sending out these encouraging messages versus the My UW app that constantly reminds students of deadlines and different things. Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
remember
That's
that
my
one?
favorite.
Yeah. Sending out that through the app. And so,
I do.
And they're seeing results. They're starting to see results. So far, the fusillade of all these measures has really helped so far. So they've taken their 4-year graduation rate from 54% to 66%. So that's a pretty big difference, in a short period of time.
Yeah.
And they now have 80% on pace to graduate in 5 years. So that's kind of what's going on.
Okay.
And it's not perfect because some students still feel pressured to not switch majors. But this is one of the real positive trends to me in higher education is colleges and universities themselves taking more responsibility for the graduation rate. And why is it happening? Because the accountability that's being demanded by students, by parents, by employers. And Anika, when you tie the state legislature money to whether or not kids graduate, people are going to make some changes. We cut the paycheck off. So what did you want to say? I know you had another comment.
So, Mark, well, two things now, actually. So the first one is that it was a question for you. Is this a crafty question our kids need to be asking in these orientation sessions? Like, hey, what's going on with your 4-year graduation rates? Or do you think that's putting them too on the spot? Is that more of a private conversation?
I think that's a fantastic question, but I wouldn't ask it in an information session. So that's a question to ask one-on-one.
Okay.
It could even be at a college fair, or you can, or you can set up a time just to talk to a
Right.
counselor. By the way, when I did that thing, when I talked, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, about
Yeah.
what I do on a college visit, on a tour, remember how I said you can request to meet with whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you're interested in astrophysics, but you can also request to meet with the
Right.
admission counselor one-on-one too. In fact, a lot of colleges set it up so that when you sign up, there's a checkbox, would you like to meet with a counselor? So if they don't do that, that's another thing. So yeah, so
Oh,
and what
nice.
I would do though, I wouldn't ask what the graduation rate is, Anika, because that's available information online. You know my rule about if you can get it in 3 clicks, don't ask it. But what I would do is I would ask
Right.
about the
Mm-hmm.
graduation rate trend. Like I noticed you were here before you were here. What
Mm.
plans are in place to bring that up higher? That could be a great question.
Gotcha. Now, the final thing my big takeaway from that article is the mention, I think it was by a student in there, where they were saying it's really the kid
Yes.
has to take some ownership in this process. And they do. And
Mm.
I feel like we don't talk, at least I mean, we just assume our kids are going to be on top of it from time to, most of the time. I mean, we know they, don't do a lot of stuff all of the time. But that's just something that really stuck with me, and something I need to just really keep hounded into Janae, is that a lot of this is on you now. Like, I can't, we can't be the ones to, I mean, we're always going to be a support system, but there's a huge ownership piece in this for the student that I don't feel like we talk about enough,
Well, I'm really
in
glad
all
you
of this
said
stuff.
that, because
So,
I can assure you the colleges expect it from you. That's why they don't like to hear from the parent. I was listening to
mm-hmm,
college representative earlier this week talking about how if there's ever an appeal involved in a process and they have a meeting and the parent and the student are involved in the appeal, if
mm-hmm.
the parent speaks first, they pretty much ding them like done. Like I didn't. No, really. I think I told you about when I visited Swarthmore College, and there was literally only 5 of us. It's just not that long ago. I visit colleges, and I've been to Swarthmore zillions of times, but I was back in the area, and so there were like only 5 of us on the tour. You know how and I don't know if you've ever been on a tour where at the start of the tour they ask everybody to introduce themselves, and they go around. They go, "There's only 5
Mm-hmm.
of them," and then they
Yes.
get to me and they say, "You don't count." You know, then it was. I didn't look 18 to 22, so yeah, so
Take
I
it as a
wasn't worthy of
compliment.
like a
Take it
10
as a
second
compliment.
introduction, but it's just a proof that what matters is the kids, right?
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, friends. I've been excited about this discussion for a while. For those of you who are first time listeners, this is the part of our podcast that we consider our systematic walk by walk through the college admission process. I wrote a book called 171 Answers. Basically, what we do is we go step by step and we take a couple excerpts from each chapter and we talk about them. And it's just our way of making sure that you don't have any gaps in your background. Because if we just pick articles or we just respond to questions or we just do interviews, we could do this for 2 years and we may never talk about some really important portions of the college admission process. But going through the book allows us to make sure that we cover everything. So this chapter is looking at what admissions officers look for in college-specific essays. Not the personal essay that goes to everybody, but the college-specific essays where they can customize their own requests from you. Anika, you read the chapter? What jumped out at you?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, it made total sense that the reason why the schools are doing this is because they want to know how well the kids fit into the culture of the school. Like, are they going to be a good fit for them? And you made an excellent point about this being the one thing that they can actually control in the application. Like, everything is general, through the Common App. But this is the one thing that allows them to see, what do you say, their personality, how well they think and write, and just flat out how well the kid prepared to take the time to know the school. That's kind of important. I also love the way that you gave the very specific ways to. Well, first of all, you said to be very specific and to provide examples. And I had to pat Jalen on the back because I thought about his essay and I was like, oh man, he did a great job of that. He gave some really, really concrete examples of how he engaged with the campus and the people and all that good stuff. So that was exciting. And the way you outlined the different things to point out. Like, knowing what the school prides itself in, their traditions, like what's their different, what makes them different. What are the qualities that you appreciate about them most? And what you always, always say, Mark, is to be genuine and honest. Don't go into this thing trying to figure out what you think they want to hear. Be yourself. Speak to what you genuinely and truly believe in about the school, and that will take you where you need to be.
Good points, all of them. And let me start by saying this. The college-specific essays are actually a great way for a student to learn about a school. I have my students go look at the college-specific essays, and you can just go to the Common App and read them. They're in there under the Writing tab. And they will let you know what a school values. They are either going to be a statement about who the school is or what the school wants to be. So that's important, first of all, to say that. Now, when you mentioned the point, Anika, that they're the only part of the process that the college gets to control, I think it's important to think about that. Like, let's literally look at all the parts of the application. Does the college get to decide what courses you take in high school? No. The grading scheme of your high school? No. The weighting system or unweighted system, whether it's IB, AP, any of that? No. Whether you took an SAT or an ACT? No. Subject tests, AP scores? Who you asked to write your recommendations? No. What your Common App essay was on? No, the Common App picks the 7 prompts. The colleges don't. Okay, so you could go on and on and on and on and on. All your extracurriculars, what you decided to get involved in and not get involved in, what you do in the summer. They have no control over any of that. There's only one thing they have control over, and they like control, by the way. So you better believe that it is important to them. It is important to them. And they will take a long time picking and deciding which, and hot debates in their offices over which questions to ask. And those questions are very, very intentionally selected. So I just have to get that out there. And they learn a lot. So just this week, Anika, as part of this whole SACAC tour, they take counselors on tours when you do on these. So I went to Oxford College of Emory. Oxford College of Emory is very unique. Emory is the only school I know that does this. When you apply to Emory, you can either apply to Oxford College, which is the original Emory, a 2-year school in Oxford, Georgia, or you can apply to the Atlanta campus. And if you go to Oxford, you automatically get in Emory after 2 years. It's a guaranteed admission. So the question is, do you want to go to Oxford or Emory? And they let you apply to both. They even let you apply to both early decision, which is crazy. But they're basically all one university, just with two. They're one university with two campuses. But in talking to one of their admissions counselors, they said, we can tell so clearly in reading the school-specific essays whether this is an Emory Atlanta kid or an Oxford College kid. Because Oxford is much more rural. Like, it's a small town. It's out in the middle of nowhere. Very small, 1,000 kids. Very small classes. Everybody knows the professors, but it's just a different vibe. So it is important. And schools will use these essays, and they'll use them in many different ways. One of the ways they will use them is to figure out whether or not you have any interest in the school, right? So they are used to determine whether or not you have interest in the school. And sometimes parents are like, I don't get that. I don't understand that. Well, usually I explain it to this way. Let's say you're an employer, Anika, and you're hiring people. And someone comes into an interview and you say to them, what do you know about my organization? And they hem and they haw and they know nothing. You're going to say you're not that serious. You're not that serious. You walked in here, you know literally nothing about us. So they're used to partly indicate whether you have interest based on your depth and substance in what you know. But then they're also used to indicate what I call demonstrated understanding. Okay, not just what you know, but do you get who we are? So, and that gets into assessing whether or not you're a fit and a match for the institution. So those are two different things. There's like, what do you know? And then you have to make the case in these essays that you're a good match for the institution, basically. You can't do that if you know nothing about the institution. So you got to know something about it. Then you have to show demonstrated understanding. So they're both an assessment of your interest and their assessment of your fit. So they're both. And that's important. And another thing I want to say is these essays are hard because they're short. And it's hard when you may have a 100 word or a 150 word or 200 word essay to try to convey a lot, or even 250. It's hard. It's a lot easier with 650 words to have some fluff in there. You can't get away. You have 25 words of fluff, and you know what I mean? You're in trouble. Another thing I'll say is that they're not always essays, so they can be short answer questions too. So, a school can do whatever the heck they want. So they can say.
So Mark, what's the difference between a question and an essay?
Oh, so a question could be like just short answer, like staccato, like, okay, it could ask you, what do you want in your college experience? 50 words. What is your biggest fear about college? 50 words. Tell me a time you experienced
it's the length.
Failure.
Are you saying it's the length?
Well, not just that. It's just really wide open as well, right? Those are wide open questions. And
okay.
But they want short answers. They want very short answers. Okay. And there can be a bunch of these really short answer questions. So the point is they're not all essays. Like those in those a lot of times you don't even have to put it in sentence form. It's bullet point. So they're allowed to exercise their creativity, in these, and it's very, very important that people understand that. The other thing I want people to understand is, and every admission officer will say this, people have a tendency to just rush through these, Anika. They don't take them as seriously. They can spend a lot of time on the personal essays and then just blow through these short answers and think, they're not that important. Either that, or they just get in a time crunch because they're starting everything late. They still got school. They still got activities. They may still have a job. They still may be working on the standardized testing, doing visits. I mean, they have a life outside of the college admission process. So if they're applying late, although you never think so sometimes, right? But so they think, I did the big. Sometimes people have a tendency to think, well, it's shorter, so maybe it's not that important. Like the big one was the 650 one. This one's like 150, so they use the length to determine the importance. And nowadays, in this competitive environment where people are applying to more and more and more colleges, schools are absolutely all over these things. 1, to assess interest, 2, to assess fit and match. And then they're also an opportunity for the colleges to learn more about the applicant. Remember, they're incredibly interested in who you are. So if you're using the opportunity to make the case, why, relating your personal story to the prompts, then they also learn more about you, which is also very, very, very important.
We would like to thank every listener who has financially supported our show.
We want to make sure that our friends of the show know that you absolutely can make a one-time gift, or you can sign up for one of our monthly giving levels. Recently, we received a lovely letter from a college counselor who made a gift and said she wants to support the show quarterly, and that is also okay.
And if you make a one-time gift or a quarterly gift, you may still be entitled to the same benefits we extend to our monthly donors.
That's right. For a gift of $60 or more within the first 12 months, you'll get all the benefits we provide in our Sustainer plan. And a gift of $120 or more in the first 12 months, and you'll get all the benefits we offer in our Expander plan.
So to support the show, all you have to do is go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. Either click the monthly gift tab or the one-time gift tab.
And be sure to visit our frequently asked question page, which is also located at yourcollegeboundkid.com for more details. This is also where you can learn about the Sustainer plan and the Enhancer plan.
Your financial support helps us defray the sizable expenses that it takes to deliver all of this great content that is aimed to empower you and your family's college admissions journey.
Different people have different abilities to give, but whatever you can contribute will be greatly appreciated, and it will allow us to remain commercial free. So thank you in advance.
Thank you.
So what do you think, Anika?
I think that I could easily fall into that category of, it's short, it must not be that important. Like, I definitely can see that. As a parent, I can see that.
Well, I'll tell you another reason why that's common, Anika. Mm-hmm. Like, there can be schools that can ask you 5, 6, or 7 of these from one school.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a lot of ones, like, you might think, there's a lot of them. They can't be that important.
All right. Yep. I can easily see that. I think the point about the demonstrated understanding, like when you said that, I was like, whoa. Like I didn't quite take it in that way.
Did that make sense? Did that make sense to you?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, and that was insightful because I just didn't think of that. I just didn't think in that lane. I wasn't thinking about. I mean, yeah, I understand. You know, I've done my research, but do I get who you are? I think that is where the kids can really start to stand out, like really start.
And it's not just do I get who you are. It's is your environment what I'm looking for. So if I go back to that Oxford College versus Emory campus, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if they're saying, oh my goodness, this is someone who needs a city, they would die here in Oxford, in Covington, Georgia, they would die. You know, because I can tell by what they talk about, what they like, what they enjoy. Like this is a city person,
right.
You know? And so, versus someone else that says, oh, I expect to have lunch with my professors and be regularly communicating with them and talking to them. And I need small classes to accept, the opposite can happen. Oh my goodness, this person is going to eat up our environment that's small and everybody knows everybody. So it's not just do you get who we are? It's what you're looking for in your college experience, who we are.
Right.
Do you see what I mean? It's a level deeper than that.
Yep.
And there's a couple other things I want to say. One is that the school-specific essays are not asked by every college. This tends to be something that's more selective schools ask. It tends to be true with more private schools and more selective schools. Now, not only private, but in general, a much higher percentage of private than public offer this, and a much higher percentage of highly selective. So a lot of your highly selective publics will do this. Because keep in mind, Anika, a lot of your public schools, we've talked about this a million times, the ones that are just crunching numbers, using GPA curriculum and test scores, they're not even asking for a personal essay at all. So they're not even asking for the main essay. So they're not so just keep in mind, it's not every single college, but these tend to be your more selective schools. Yeah. And anything else you want to say?
Well, but don't you think even for those schools that don't ask for that, don't you think that's a good exercise for them to go through? Just like you said, it's not just about, getting them. It's about, is this really what I want? So I see this as a worthwhile exercise for them anyway, for the student to go through to say, is this really what I want? Regardless if it's
I'll tell you what,
on there or not.
I totally agree with you. And I'll tell you another way of applying it. I see this as students aren't going to like me here, but I see this as a great thing for a parent to say. Let's say a kid is like, I want to visit schools in California, and you live in like Delaware, New Jersey. And you're like, okay, your parent's like, okay, that's going to be multiple days off work. That's going to be, airfare, meals, rent a car. I told you I'd drop like $5,000 when Karis did this stuff on visits. So I see a parent, and that was a long time ago, but I see a parent saying, you know what, before I take the time to do all this, I want to see from you what the school offers, why you're a match. And I see that as being an excellent thing that a parent imposes on a kid before they take time. And quite honestly, you could do it for a school that's an hour away. It doesn't have to just be an airfare. Right. Yeah.
I agree.
So that's a good one. So there's one other thing I want to share. And I do some national webinars every year, and they're free. They're 1 hour webinars. They're open to the public. I do them for Revolution Prep. Revolution Prep does a lot of test prep for my clients as well as my students at KIPP. And I don't get paid a penny by Revolution Prep, but they do give all of my private clients and my KIPP students like hundreds of dollars off of their normal price for test prep. So when they say, Mark, you want to do a webinar for us? I'm like, sure. How many do you need? Because in fact, Anika, didn't they worked with both your kids, didn't they? Jalen and Jeanette?
Yep, sure did. No, they didn't work with Jalen. They worked with Naya.
I thought they worked with Jalen for grad school, for GRE.
Oh, darn. Brain fart.
See, he's so independent. You don't even know what's going on. He talked to me about that, not you. They sure did.
You are correct.
Yep, they did. So
love that,
listeners, Jalen, Anika's oldest son, Jalen, is getting ready to apply to some, what programs are they, Anika?
Anesthesiologist assistant programs.
And it's like a master's program. Yeah. So they do GRE, do all that. So anyway, I'm saying all this to say that I am doing a 1 hour webinar on school specific essays coming up. So at the end of our show, if you want to stay tuned, and I'll share the details if you want to sign up for free. If you want to get a deeper dive, we can talk about it for like 50 minutes here, but I'm going to do a full hour presentation if you're interested.
Yay.
So Anika, there's something that's been kind of bothering me a little bit, and it's slightly off topic, but this is our last week talking about the writing portion of the application. And so it is related to that. And so before we transition to teacher Rex and other Rex next week, so in my 4-part interview with Susan Tree on the personal essay on episodes 59, 60, 61, and 62, Susan and I, we really emphasized that it isn't the topic of the essay that matters, but it's what you say about the topic. And I stand by that 100%. But there is another side. And I do think it's important that other side comes out, because we didn't even talk about that whole time. We so wanted to emphasize that you can write about sports, just don't do the traditional essay where, you know what I mean, where you're on the bench and now you're the hero and score the winning goal. Like, as long as you come with the unique perspective and it's your story. But there is another side, and the other side, it goes like this. And I think it's just important that we bring that out to be balanced before we leave the writing. So as when an admissions officer reads a file, there are a number of implicit questions that are going on in the mind of the admissions officer. One is, can this person do the work? If they can't do the work, they're dead on arrival, right? You're dead if they can't do the work. Another one, what we just talked about, right? How well will they fit in here? And there's another one that's related to that, and it's really important. And this is on a subconscious level. It's not like everybody's thinking and checking a box to this question, but it's, do I like this person? Would I want to have a 2-hour dinner with this student? If I was a student at the school, would I want the student to be a roommate? That is really important. And in my book, I talk about that was the most common question that Stanford admissions officer would ask. Is this somebody you'd want as a roommate? So why is this important? Well, the reason why it's important is if in your personal essay, you say something that makes you unlikable, good luck getting in, because admission officers don't advocate for people that they find unlikable for schools that do holistic admissions. That's very rare. So Anika, can you think of anything, and I'm putting you on the spot here, I didn't talk about this before in our prep. Can you think about anything a student can say in their essay? And I'm referring really to personal essays or even all essays. It could be school specific or main essay, right? That could make them unlikable.
Well, of course, my little mind was just racing when you were saying that, because I'm like, who and why and what in the heck? Why would anybody do that? But I guess it's something that they wouldn't recognize as being unlikable.
Yeah, they don't start out saying, my goal is to make myself unlikable, so what can I say? It's not that they don't do that, right? They just do things that are like nails on a chalkboard to the admission officer.
Right.
So the question are, what are some things that you think that that can happen in the writing that are like that nails in a chalkboard effect?
Well, my first thought is that, I might say, Janae might be like, well, I don't really like your school, but as I start to grow a little bit, I still kind of don't like you, but I think you could still be a good fit. I don't know.
Well, most people don't do that.
Just saying little things that where they think they're being honest and nice about. I don't know, Mark. I just can't imagine.
Well, we don't normally record at 8 a.m, but we are this time. So both our minds are just waking up here. You're more the morning person than me. But so let me give you some. And one was a story I had in my book, Anika, and I don't know if you remember this, but this is right after the election. And so emotions were really raw. So one of my students chooses to write his essay on, basically, he's so ticked off at his classmates that are moping around about the fact that Donald Trump won the election. And he goes on and like, get over it. Stop whining. Stop complaining. Deal with it. And I had to talk to that student. I'm like, oh my goodness. First of all, Donald Trump is not very popular in admissions offices. All right. The administration wants to destroy the Department of Education. There are not a lot of Trump fans. And so there's a reason why people say, like, you might want to stay clear of religion and politics. Like, you can really irk a lot of people with strong political views that are generally unpopular. The same danger exists with strongly impassioned and articulated views about Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, or for that matter, the eventual 2020 presidential nominees. People tend to have very strong views about politics, and if your views don't jive with their views, you run the risk of alienating the admissions officer. And it is unrealistic
to expect someone to advocate for you if you alienate them. This gives you a glimpse into how human and how subjective the decision-making process can be in holistic admissions.
So that's one. Like that was like, oh my goodness, I like we need to change this right now because there's a good chance the person reading your application is not happy about the election and feeling what you're
Right.
criticizing people for. So that's one. Another one. Sometimes students think they're sort of doing this shock jock effect to try to make a point, and they use a lot of vulgarity. That's not good.
Really?
Yes, like
What?
they'll drop F bombs, MF this and GD this and they might and they yeah, because they're like, this is just who I am. I'm just being real. I'm just keeping it real. I'm just calling it like it's like that is not cool. That is not cool. And
Wow.
there's occasionally someone in admission office that may not care about that. Probably someone that talks that way themselves. But I don't like that stuff. Like, you know what? I'm gonna reveal something to our listeners, Anika. When I was in college, I had a friend who used to say to me, "You have virgin ears," because I would like bristle and recoil when people use foul language. I would like literally grimace, and he would see it.
That's hilarious.
A lot. I don't like all that foul language, and so I'm really old fashioned.
Oh my goodness.
I'm really old fashioned, and so.
And that's okay.
But thank you for that. But the point is, like, don't do that. That's one thing not to do. Another thing, and I put this in the things we talked about last week, but we didn't go into it. I call it, don't be graphic with the gruesome. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're in a car accident and you're describing the scene, because in my book I say be multisensory, paint the picture, right? But you don't want to start talking about how like the yellow pus was like oozing out of your eyes and you don't want to like just go in detail and describe what your acne problem was like when you were 60. Like, don't be graphic with the gruesome because you don't want people like wincing, and
okay, I can see that happening.
And even more than that, you don't want your essay to be so negative and so sad that like I've read some essays, Anika, where students talked about being raped, and I'm sure some people have done them well, but they're really hard to do well, in my opinion, because you're just feeling so sorry for the person. And it's better for an essay to have more of an inspirational quality. And I know Susan's read a lot more essays than me. I'm sure she would say, Mark, I've read some good ones. I'm just saying they're hard to do. I had the privilege of serving on the board. I'm on a board in New York City called Go to College New York City. And one of the legends on our board, Peter Alexander, was in Columbia's admission office for 35 years. And this is something that he used to speak up against. He's like, I don't want to come out like I need to get a shower when I read an essay. I don't want to be all beat up like I got out of a boxing ring with Mike Tyson. Like I'm depressed because I read sad story after sad story after sad story. So you got to be careful with that all that sort of macabre sort of vibe. That's real sad, tragic things. Like I'm not saying never do it, but boy, you need to tread lightly. I'm saying it's hard to pull off and do well. Another thing, students have to be careful if they come off like they're flaunting their wealth. So that can be rough, and especially now in the context of not just with this scandal and this crisis that happened, Anika, but also, because that's causing more scrutiny to privilege than ever. But just in general, with the whole movement going on about the 1% and having all this wealth, and people can really do it in little subtle ways. Like, one of the students that Karis went to school with early in the 4th and 5th grade, we'd go to their house and they were loaded. Loaded. They had 3 full-time people working there. They had a nanny, they had a house manager, and they had an architect, full-time people. They did. Goodness. Yeah. And he had this thing where you could just click a button and he could be in France and it would water all his plants all out the house. And I remember he was talking, and this is Dad, he was like, he said, do you know the thing only cost me $100,000 to get that device? And so like, if a student was going on talking about this stuff, it really makes you non-relatable to a lot of people. Admissions officers don't get paid a lot. You never know what all kinds of emotions are going on, thinking you're entitled, maybe jealousies. It's hard. Sometimes students do these essays on, jet setting all over the country, riding their horse. And it's tough because that may be their passion. And I'm not saying not to do it, but boy, they have to be really careful coming off super privileged. I remember one year Stanford said the worst essay that they read was the student that had to talk about the biggest trial they had, challenge they had, and they talked about how they were so expecting a brand new
Lexus
for their birthday, and they got a used one. That was what they chose to write on. Not good. Superficial.
Wow.
You also I find it's hard to do really good essays on. Sometimes students say, like, what they talk about is how hard the college admissions process is. Like, that's what they choose to write on. It's so hard. I have to prep for the SAT. I have to do all these essays, and I got school. Once again, I'm not saying never, but I'm saying that's a hard essay to pull off because you can come off kind of whiny. And then one other thing, a couple other things. Be careful writing about sexual experiences and eating disorders. Those are kind of tough. Like sexual experiences, like too personal, and eating disorders are like, they raise a flag because schools are concerned. Is that going to spread like wildfire on our dorms? So that's a concern. And it just, another one. Oh, I was listening to an admission officer from Lehigh say the worst essay they got all year was a girl describing graphically how she came on her period for the first time in an awkward environment. And she was saying, please, no essays on bodily fluids. Please, no more essays on bodily fluids. So I just want to bring a little balance and say that while it's true that I will say I will never say don't write on certain topics because it's how you say and what you say. I just want to say the other side of it is there's certain things that are really, really, really hard to do well. And you got to tread very, very lightly if you choose to do this. It's also the boyfriend, girlfriend ones can be tough too but it depends how you do it. Like if you talk about how your girlfriend dumped you and all the lessons you learned from that could be amazing. But if you act like the most important thing to you is your girlfriend, you're all into them and they're like your everything, you can come off superficial. So anyway, any thoughts on that? I kind of talked a lot there.
No, I think it's all good. It's interesting that students would write about a lot of things. Who knew? But yeah.
And the last thing I want to say on writing, grab people's attention early on. Admission officers are reading so many essays. So if you take too long to get to the point, like at least in the first paragraph, like first sentences are great. If an admissions officer is reading an essay, here's one that University of Virginia started out. I sat in the back of the police car, waiting and waiting and waiting. That was like, you are going to read the next sentence, right? And so this is what I say, like, they don't always have to start out with a dramatic first sentence, but you got to get into it pretty soon, first paragraph, because if your boss, let's say the director of admission, was to say, hey, I need you to come into my office right now. A good essay, the admission counselor should be thinking, oh man, I hate to leave this essay. It's so good. What are you thinking, Anika, over there?
I'm just stuck on the police car thing.
Admit you wanted to read the next sentence. Admit it.
Well, pending they don't have a record, I'm assuming they're gonna be okay.
Yeah, it needs to be a false arrest. You don't want to read it if they go in and talk about their armed robbery. Yeah.
Right? Oh my goodness.
It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right, Mark, this week's question is from Rob in Georgetown, Texas. And Rob asked a question about something I had no idea was happening. And he wants to know about the new no-enrollment online options, such as the ones at LSU and Portland State, where students don't have to enroll at all to sign up, and you simply pay to take this class. Wow, did not know, Mark.
Well, you remember when maybe, I don't know how long ago it was, Anika, we talked about open enrollment schools, where we were making the point that not every one of these schools is super competitive to get into, right? There are schools that if you have a GED or a high school diploma, that you can go. And we talked about that. And this is an extension of that to the do you remember when we did that?
I vaguely remember that, yeah.
Yes, no? Sort of, kind of? Vaguely? Yeah. Yeah. And so And so this is an extension of that. Is just carried over to the online world, which of course online education is booming. I was talking to a faculty member actually at a pretty large school, and I was talking to them, and they were saying we're getting killed by online education. Our enrollment is down because more and more people are doing online because you've got non-traditional students, older students going back, getting degrees, either second degrees or first degrees, and they can't give up work, or even younger students that chose to go into the workforce, but they're trying to get education. And online keep getting better and better, more flexible and more flexible. And so this is an extension of that. So it's online distance learning. Okay, let's take a look. Particularly, let's talk about the LSU one, just the first one he mentioned. It has some advantages. It's self-paced, so you can do it on your own time. Here's the cool part. Admission to LSU is not required for enrollment. So you don't have to go through the admission process to take classes. So that's really cool, because if you've got a student that maybe didn't do that well in high school, or doesn't even want to just go through the whole process, they can get college courses for credit. And they also have a lot of flexibility. So you can work anytime on the courses. Now, particularly the LSU course, you're allowed up to 6 months to complete a class. You start and stop when you want, self-paced. And even that you're allowed you have up to 6 months to complete a class, they do allow a 2-month extension as well. If you have to request it, but if you run into some specific challenges. So now there's some things you need to keep in mind. You do have to have some technical things in place. You need to have a computer with high-speed internet. You need a webcam. You need a mic. And you got to pay all the fees. And a lot of these programs do not allow for financial aid. So you need to be able to pay, the full freight. And they oftentimes outsource, their grading and everything to organizations like ProctorU and Examity, example, are a couple that are common that are used. So it's just another way to get education without, a lot of times, this is a great question, Anika, and I'm really glad that Rob asked it, because a lot of times, if you think about the name of our show, Your College Bound Kid, you think about a lot of what we talk about. A lot of times I think we're almost working off of an assumption that it's an 18 or 19-year-old or 17-year-old, right? That's going off to college and probably going to live in the dorms and have a residential living experience. But there's so many people for whom that is not their college experience. And the part of higher ed that's growing the fastest is the non-traditional student. It's the 25-year-old student. It's the online student. And so I think it's great that we had a question about online. And I also think it's great that we had a question, because I do get concerned sometimes when we get into all the minutia of the YS essays and everything, and we're talking about highly selective, highly competitive admissions, that I always want to let people know that the majority of colleges are non-competitive, and they're open to average students and sometimes below average students. And in this case, open to a 30 or 40 or 50-year-old that wants to take classes. And there are other versions as well, Anika. These are growing all the time. So, for example, Purdue has a great global education program that students can take online, that they don't need to apply to the university for, and can get college credit. And so does the University of Maryland. So anyway, it's just good to let our listeners know about some other creative options. Any thoughts?
Yeah. My first question is, college credit toward what? Is it still going toward a traditional degree?
Yes. In other words, they'll let you bypass the admission process in these open enrollment schools. But remember, you still got to prove it. You still got to prove it by getting the grades, right? So if you get the grades to show that you have content mastery, it can count toward a degree.
So I guess it's just the demand of people wanting the residential full on, I'm a kid, I want to go through the growing up experience in college difference. As opposed to, yeah, I guess in my mind, I'm like, why wouldn't I do that? Why wouldn't I just go through? Well, the first answer, I guess, is because you said there's no financial aid around it. So you have to pay for the courses. That's one thing. But if I'm getting the same credit and it's the same type of courses, like the same level quality, it's just simply online.
Well, I'm actually glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that up, because there's been a lot of criticism of online as well, because you're not having the same type of interaction with the professor.
Okay.
As a lot of it is self-paced and on your own, and that interaction with the professor is vital to a certain type of education.
Okay.
And so is and there's also things that are learned in the residential experience. It also requires a degree of discipline and self-starting, because the thing is, the same reason why students off campus don't graduate the same rate as students on campus, you're now not in an academic educational environment all the time, right? You got work, you got TV, you got
Right.
family and kids and all kinds of distractions. So graduation rates are really quite low for people, but it's so person dependent. It's like, if you're the kind of person that doesn't need structure of an advisor and structure of being around all the support apparatus that a college has, and you can just hunker down and do your work, it's just like the kind of person that could do test prep on their own versus the kind of person that needs an instructor.
Okay.
That kind of person can do really well in an online environment, but it's still a complete apples for oranges comparison to what you get when you're in, if you're in a learning laboratory surrounded by all kinds of different people that you're learning from over meals, in the dorm room, in class discussions, in teacher engagement. That's not the same thing. But at the same thing, this can be really, really affordable, and it can be extremely practical because you don't have to, you can do it without having to leave your job.
Right.
I mean, you can make it work around your schedule.
Oh, thank you for that, Rob.
I think it's exciting.
Yeah.
But it's not for everybody.
Yeah. Not for Janaea, just so you know.
Or maybe little John either.
No, let's talk about that next year.
Yeah, we got time to figure out. We got more than next year. I don't want him doing college prep at age 11.
He might.
More than next year.
I don't know, Mark.
No. Pump the brakes. Pump the brakes. I have I get my 9th grade families and they want to start meeting with me right away. And I tell them, I'll do a quarterly with you. We'll do once a quarter just to make sure you're on pace. And that's perfect. But we don't need to start going hardcore that early. Friends, we were overwhelmed. Anika and I were humbled by the outpouring of responses to Ann Jean and the first part of her interview. And guess what? The second part is just as good. So listen and see what Ann did once she was in college to figure out what her career path should be. Part 1 dealt with what she did when she was a high school student. The final part, she shares what she did while she was in college. And once again, have your student, college counselors, listen to this interview. Parents, if there's a way you can have them listen without coming off like you're nagging them, if you can be, skillful enough to subtly have them listen, or I think you might like what this student has to say. Have them listen because I listen to it multiple times, Anika, and I get inspired every time. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
So let's jump ahead to college. And you're in college now. Tell us, did you join any clubs in college to sort of further your ambition of being a dentist?
Yeah. So in college, I really wanted to remain focused on dentistry. So I didn't want to join a lot of clubs. I remember a really long time ago, somebody told me quality over quantity. And so I really wanted to stay focused. So I only joined one club, which is the Undergraduate Dental Association. And my very first semester, they had officer positions. And so I filled out the application and submitted that, and they rejected me, which is cool because he told me to apply again the very next semester. And yeah, so I joined that club, and
so you applied the next semester, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I applied the next semester, and he like let me in. All right.
I have to stop you. So this is twice now we've seen you demonstrate one of the things that I emphasize over and over and over again, as the skills to develop to be successful in life, and that is, some people call it perseverance, some people call it grit, some people call it resiliency. It's the ability to bounce back from a setback. So, obviously the first time was you tried to get the shadow opportunity with the dentist. They said, that's okay. What did you do? You could have stayed down on the ground. You could have moved on. No, you came back, and you're doing the same, showing the same resiliency here. And it's one of the most important things for life success. So I just have to kind of underscore it. So now you come back. Is this your sophomore year or your second semester as a freshman, or when is all this happening?
So the applications came out the second semester of my freshman year. He said that he was very impressed that a freshman would want to be an officer. And then he said, try applying again next semester. So the next semester was the beginning of my sophomore year. And then I applied and then I got the position.
Okay, so what did you do as an officer?
So I was the treasurer. So I was in charge of collecting the money, balancing our accounts, making sure all of our paperwork was in for so we can get funds for the club. Whenever we went somewhere and we spent money for the club, I was in charge of the receipts and making sure that the receipts were this, like the number on the receipt was the same as the number that we wrote down in our forms that we turned into the school. Those are like just my basic responsibilities, and also like coming to officer meetings and speaking to pre-dental students if I had to, and kind of being the bridge between the student and the president.
So what did you learn about dentistry through this club, either through speakers or field trips, or I'm not sure exactly what all the things your club did, but
so much.
Yeah, well, why don't you tell us what the club did as well as what you learned about dentistry through the activities of the club? And once again, it's not about joining 3 clubs, 5 clubs. She joined one club that was a great match for her career, and she went deep in it. And that's all you need to do. So talk to us about what you did as well as what you learned about dentistry through the club.
So what we did in the club mainly was teach pre-dental students how to apply, how to find places to shadow because you needed shadowing hours. We went on school trips, so we would visit schools and talk to administration. The board of administration at the school. We also had like guest speakers who would come and speak about their experience in dental school, what students should expect.
That's great because you're not only learning about the profession, but you're learning about the, your pathway, and what's the pathway going to be like, by learning more about dental school. And so is this all this time, is it confirming, yeah, I want to do this. This is what I want to do.
Yeah. There was also this thing called this free clinic that all students had the opportunity to go to. It's called a Ben Massell Dental Clinic. And basically, students from Georgia State, Georgia Tech, and I think UGA were allowed to come into the clinic, and then they would they would work as a dental assistant under fourth-year dental students. So you'd make those connections with fourth-year dental students and also learn some assisting skills as well. So I learned so much from that by itself. Like I thought that was just like the best part of the club, that I actually got to learn hands-on skills. Like I got to interact with patients. And again, I saw another aspect of dentistry that I didn't know about.
What aspect was that? What did you learn this time?
Oh, well, this time I learned about how expensive dental care is and how a lot of people don't have access to it. And because of that, they end up waiting so long that an initial problem that might seem not as bad, it just becomes like huge to the point where they're in so much pain that they have to get the tooth extracted and they lose the whole tooth structure. Like that's the main thing that I saw there, just the difference between people who had insurance and those who didn't have insurance and the repercussions of not having insurance.
Wow. So this is awesome. And so another thing I'm a huge advocate of is internships. And sometimes students shy away because they're, if you're not going to pay me, I'm not doing it. Talk to us about your experience with an unpaid internship. How you got it and what you learned through your unpaid internship.
Okay. So one of the officers in the Undergraduate Dental Association, her name was Kaylee, and she shadowed a dentist. Her name was Dr. Baumard. Well, is Dr. Baumard. And one day she was going to Dr. Baumard's office, and I was like, hey, can I tag along? And she was like, yeah, sure, no problem. And I was like, okay, cool. And then so they were talking, and I ended up just asking, I was like, hey, Dr. Baumrin, if it's not too much trouble, can I just come by your office and shadow you as well, or potentially work? Well, in my mind, I thought potentially work, but like out loud, I said, like, can I shadow? I had the goal of potentially
So you
working.
learned to be slick. You already
Yeah.
learned to be slick. Like, so in sales, we call this the small ask and getting a small win. So you get the small win and then get your foot in the door. You were slick.
Yeah.
What year was this in college? Is this sophomore year?
This was also sophomore year.
Okay.
Yeah. And so she was like, yeah, sure, come by anytime. It's fine. I'd love to have you. And I was like, yay, great. Okay, now I need to figure out how to find some way to let her let me in forever.
So how did you? So talk to us how you did that. Besides do a good job, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I would be just very consistent. As far as like I'd just like show up to the office, I would work anything anytime somebody needed something, one of the staff, they'd like ask, oh, hey, can somebody go do perio charting? I'd be like, yeah, sure, I don't know what it is, but I'm willing to learn and I will do it. Or anytime something needed cleaning, I made sure like everything was like cleaned down. Like I was just absolutely perfect. I tried to be absolutely
Love
perfect.
it. I bet you were.
Yeah. And and I was just overall like pretty like enthusiastic, because I didn't have to fake it because I was just really happy just to be there.
So let me stop.
Just,
This is another indication you're on the right career trajectory. Like you're happy to be there. You enjoy it. I always tell people your goal is to find the thing that's so pleasurable that it doesn't even feel like working. Like I love being a college coach. I do it 7 days a week, morning, noon, night. It doesn't even feel like work to me. And that's what you're trying to do. And this is what I'm hearing from Ann. So keep going. Just have to have a couple interludes here.
Yeah. So yeah, I just like kind of showed up when I could in between classes, or the most consistent. I was the most consistent when I like during my breaks. And even while I was shadowing her, I was still shadowing other doctors as well. Back to the Ben Massell Dental Clinic, I had met this one student, and he said, oh, I shadow this doctor, this oral surgeon. And I was like, cool, I've never been to an oral surgeon's office. Can you give me his information? He was like, yeah, sure. And then I called the office and they were like, yeah, come in. You know Tyler? And I was just like, yeah, I know Tyler, kind of. I met him once. But and they're like, yeah, coming in. We love Tyler. And I was like, that's great. And so they let me like go to the office, and I shadowed an oral surgeon during that time while I was still shadowing Dr. Baumrin.
So you've got to shadow multiple dentists, it sounds like. And how did your shadowing turn into an actual internship, where it wasn't like a 1 or 2 day or even a week venture?
I went. So because I was there for so long, it just, since I've been there since sophomore year, it just kind of naturally progressed into an internship. We didn't even originally call it an internship. I was just kind of the student that was there occasionally. And then eventually she was like, oh, okay, well, we can pay you for being here because you're here so often. And yeah, you can just work. And that's just how that progressed. It wasn't like any major thing. It just kind of like.
All right, I have to comment again. So while we can't guarantee this, notice that Ann's unpaid internship turned into a paid internship. But it wouldn't have happened if she didn't do a good job.
Yeah, that's true.
Exactly. So that's fantastic. That's awesome.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
The recommended resource for episode 64 is a blog article that appears on the College Essay Guy website, and the article is entitled, Why This College Essay? Now, Anika and I did not specifically talk about the why us or the why this college essay in our conversation about college-specific essays, but this is the most frequently found college-specific essay that you will see. Now, here's an example of a why this school or a why us essay from this year. It's from Brown University, and it reads as follows. What do you hope to experience at Brown through the open curriculum? And what do you hope to contribute to the Brown community? 250-word limit. Now, if you don't nail this essay, your application is going straight into the waitlist or the denial pile. And I've had multiple colleges tell me they spend more time discussing their answer to the Why Us essay than test scores and almost anything else in the file. Now, this blog article is written in a way where it's broken down into 4 parts. The first part looks at how not to write your Why This College essay. Second part, what to include in your Why This College essay. And the third part includes resources that you can use about a particular school. And I think this third part is the weaker part of the article because there are some great resources that are omitted, but they make up for it in the fourth part, which looks at additional resources for writing your Why This School essay and has a couple excellent examples, one from Tufts University and one from the University of Michigan. So you can see how specific you need to be. The biggest mistake I see with all my students on these essays is they're far too general. Even when I emphasize, be granular, be specific, they're still too general. What I love about these examples is they show you the level of specificity that you need to write with. We'll link this blog article in the show notes for you to take a look. I'll now return to the final part of my interview with one of my former students, Ann Jean.
And I know you've also done some community service related to dental health, been like international community service. Talk to us about that, how that came about and what that experience was like.
So so through the doctor that I work with, she does a lot of community work because part of dentistry is a lot of community work. So I think 2 summers ago, I went on a trip with her to Bainbridge, Georgia, where it's called the Emory Farm Worker Program. And I was actually the first pre-dental student to be part of that program. And I assisted her chairside, and as well as I helped translate for the Haitian farmers that were there.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. That's great. So this is good. We're going to wind down in a few, but what is it about being a dentist? Like, why do you want to be a dentist?
The main thing is I get to help people, right? And I know that's like a big thing for any healthcare professional. But what I get to do is I get to provide instant like tangible help. It's like somebody comes in that day and they have like a toothache, and I get to fix that as soon as possible. And that person doesn't have to be in that pain anymore. And there are also a bunch of other issues in dental healthcare that I've realized that I actually care about. So like previously, like I said, about people not being able to access dentistry, and I want to be able to provide an avenue for people to do that. So those are the main 2 things for me, why I'm mostly interested in dentistry.
Awesome. So Ann, talk to us about your plans. Everyone's like, you've got a lot of people thinking this Ann is like impressive, because I know I felt that way. You reached out for help for me, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm like, can I bottle you up and like clone you here?
Oh my gosh.
So tell us, what are your plans for the rest of 2019?
Okay, well, for 2019, I would like to finish my thesis. I would also.
So what's your thesis?
Oh, it's on characterizing the biophysical properties of integral membrane protein CHTA and Cornea bacterium diphtheriae. So that's
You're
what it's
a deep sister, you know that? You may as well just spoken like Russian or what. I don't know what you said, but it really sounded impressive.
Okay, basically I'm just looking at this like protein, and I'm trying to figure out like how it binds to heme and what are the different properties of what different properties cause this to happen. And I'm running a bunch of tests to figure that out. That's like the gist of it, non-specific. But yeah.
Good for you. Thank you for giving me the elementary version. I followed the second one.
So yeah, and then I'm trying to take my DAT. Well, I'm going to take my DAT
So we'll tell
in
people what DAT is.
uh,
What happens when you get in a profession, you get into all this inside baseball talk. I have to be careful I don't do it with college admissions, but I know I've worked with a few dental students, but tell our listeners what DAT is.
So it's the dental admissions test. I will be taking that in July. I will also be applying to dental school June 1st, the day the application opens. Yes, I'm already putting that out there. It's happening.
So tell us some schools that you're going to apply to.
Okay, so UPenn, Michigan, the school in Georgia. I actually don't remember the name since it changes so often. Last time, I think it was DCG. I'm pretty sure it's DCG now. Chapel Hill, Harvard, Temple, Tennessee, and Alabama.
Good for you.
And Howard.
Good. So you got a nice list of schools. All right.
Mhm.
So you're going to take the DAT. You're going to apply to dental school. And anything else?
Yeah, I will. In May, I'll be going on a mission trip with the dental school, DCG. And I will be assisting basically I'll be working as an assistant. So I'll be doing cleanings and things like that.
So you have to reach out to either the dentists you shadowed with in high school or the ones you interned with in college, and they need to be recommendation writers for you. You know that, right?
Oh yeah. I plan on, so like once I graduate, I have this whole like list of like letters I have to write with like thank yous and like cakes and things like that for all the people who got me through this
Cakes?
hard.
You are that's fantastic. What are you gonna do? Bake cakes for people?
Yeah.
I think it's an amazing idea. It's just like you're just beyond your years thinking of these things. I'm so like I don't know where did that idea just pop in your head or did somebody tell you that?
No, it's like I've done it before. I used to work at a daycare during the summers in between high school, and once I left, so many people helped me because I was so clueless about daycare stuff, and I was so appreciative of all the things that they did. So I baked them all cake pops. They weren't very great, but they enjoyed them. They're like, these are so good. They're ugly, but they're good. I'm just like, thank you. I tried my best.
Oh, and this is great. I mean, your future is so bright. I can't wait to see the impact you're going to have on the world. I stay in touch with all my students. So, I'll be following up with you. And before I let you go, though, I always do this where I put our guests on the hot seat, ask a few lighthearted questions, get to know you a little bit more. So tell us about your family. Let's start with that. Okay.
My family is really funny. They're a very funny group of people. Everyone is a character. My mom and my dad are just very hard workers, just extremely hard workers. I think that's probably where I get my work ethic from. It didn't matter where I went. No matter where I went for school, it would have still been the same thing. And I get that from them. So they never complain. They just do their job. And I don't complain either.
See, so parents, it's the lessons you're teaching kids by your example. Any brothers or sisters?
I do. I have a younger sister who's 15 and a younger brother who is 12.
What do you enjoy doing for fun, Anne?
What do I do for fun? Great question.
Don't tell me you're such a hard worker that you have zero life.
So mainly because I am broke, I tend to hang out with my friends, honestly. We go hiking, we go to movies. We do very basic things that require.
It didn't need to be exotic. That's very relatable. There are a lot of broke college kids, so you're not alone.
Yeah, we do things that are inexpensive. Sometimes we go out to dinners when one of us has a paycheck, or we go to whatever free school event there is.
That's good.
Occasionally I exercise. I think that's a lot of fun.
What are you? A jogger, a biker, a walker, swimmer? What do you do?
God, I hate jogging. I absolutely hate jogging. I love sprints. I can't jog to save my life. I love weightlifting. Yeah. I love weightlifting, and I love. I used to rock climb in my freshman and sophomore year. I
Nice.
rock climbed a lot, and that was a lot of
Great.
fun.
So 3 more quickies. If you were not a dentist, what
Ooh.
would you do? What do you think you would do in your life?
What would I be doing? I don't know. I honestly, I have absolutely no idea. I have to like go back to childhood. What did I like to do? I used to, before the anthropologist thing, I wanted to
Mhm.
write. I was pretty decent at writing. And I would write a lot. I'd make little comic books. I'd draw things, and so maybe writing, maybe something artistic. I feel like it'd definitely be something
Well,
artistic since I was really into the arts. I used to do photography
nice,
too.
nice.
So
Well, based on that thesis
Mhm.
that you're doing, that in-depth thing, I think you could also have a career as a medical researcher.
Maybe.
So what would you say
Who
is the
knows?
biggest lesson you've learned in life so far?
Oh, actually, you kind of told me this when I came to
Mhm.
North Springs, or if it might have been
It's their high
before. You
school, by
said,
the way. North Springs is the high school that that Ann
yeah,
attended. Mhm.
you said it's not about where you go; it's about what you do when you
Yes,
get
I'm glad you
there.
remembered
And I think
that.
you told me that.
I'm glad
Yeah,
you remembered that.
yeah. So I stuck with that. I was like, it's not about where you go, Anne.
So I've slightly
Yeah.
expanded it now. When I used to say it's not where you go, it's
Mhm.
not what you do when you get there. But now I say it's not where you go, it's what you do when you get there and what you do when you get out of there. So it's not just the school experience, but what you do in life. But you're doing all those things. So you remembered that. I'm glad. That's why education is so
Yeah.
rewarding, which is great. And what would you say is the hardest part of being a college student?
I think for me, it's mm, just, I kind of came to this realization that I'm just kind of at the cusp of knowledge.
Hmm.
And having a college education doesn't mean that I know everything.
Hmm.
I was actually having this conversation with a professor the other day because I was just like, I'm so disappointed. I know nothing. um, and yeah, I just like I don't know everything, and there's just so much more to learn and explore. So I think that's the most difficult thing coming out of college for me is that I thought this 4 years would have me, very, very, very knowledgeable. And I am somewhat knowledgeable, but there's just so much. I'm just like scratching at the surface. There's so much more.
Mm.
And yeah.
That's great. Lifetime learner. And then what last thing, give
Mhm.
some advice to the students that are listening to you and you can't take, what the one pearl of wisdom I gave you. You need to give me you need to give come you need to come with another one. You need to come with another nugget. So
Okay.
yeah, what's your wisdom that you can bequeath to our 18-year-olds or 16-year-olds or even to their parents that they can pass on to their kids?
Oh, it's to just not give up. Like,
Yes.
even if it's hard,
Hmm.
even if you just feel like, oh, I'm just like not the smartest person, or I'm just not going to get this. Like, just don't give up on yourself. Like, do not do that. The times where I've pushed through when I really, really wanted to quit, um, were just like the most rewarding times because at the end, like I look back and I was just like, wow, that was so hard, but like I made it. I made it through, and I'm so proud of me that I did this. So yeah, just to not give up.
I mean, that is such a great lesson. And, I used to have this quote I used to have at the bottom of my emails. I switch my quotes up every now and then. Like now I have a different quote at the bottom of all my emails than I did back then. But I used to have this quote is from, Albert Einstein that says 99% of inspiration is perspiration.
Mm,
Right? It's kind of, or no, actually, I think it was Thomas Edison. Now that I think about it, I think it
mm,
was Thomas Edison. But
mm.
but you get that right. Like sweat, work
Yeah, yeah,
hard. Yeah. Well, and this has been
yeah.
fantastic. Um, I appreciate you so much. I'm excited about your life trajectory, the career, all the people you're going to touch, and honestly, you said things that a lot of people don't learn in an entire lifetime. So you are wise beyond your years, and your future is bright. And I say this with all sincerity. It's just been such a privilege that you crossed my path, and I was able to have whatever influence I was able to have in you. And let's stay in touch, okay?
Yeah, we'll do.
Thank you again.
Next week in the news, hackers breach college applicant databases and seek ransom. And we'll be in chapter 65 of 171 Answers. And we'll be talking about Mark's advice on teacher recommendations for your kids' college application. And next week's question is from a dad who wants to know how to factor in a university's honors college when categorizing the schools on his list. And Mark's interview next week is with Mr. Chris Carlton. He's the founder of studyabroadsmarter.com. And it's all about the value of studying abroad, part 1.
Okay, friends, as promised, I told you that I would let you know at the end of the podcast how you can sign up if you want to attend the webinar I'm doing on college-specific essays. All you do is go to www.revolutionprep.com/webinars with an S to register. And I actually have 3 of them coming up. So on May 8th, I'm going to be doing a full hour on how colleges evaluate you and how you get free money for colleges. And on June 11th, I'm doing one on demonstrated interest, a full hour to go a little deeper than we did when we talked about it. And then on July 11th, college-specific essays. And so we'll put this link in the show notes. But if you love this stuff and you want an extra hour on any of those subjects, then just go to www.revolutionprep.com/webinars. And you can sign up for the free webinar. And guess what? They'll see my face and they'll find out, what did you call me the other day? Creepy? No, you said you're not creepy.
I said you could
Maybe
have
they'll
been
find
creepy.
out I'm not creepy looking. Okay. They'll see that I'm not creepy.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, boy. Have a good week, Anika.
You too, Mark.
I'll talk to you later.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. And if you found this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that could really use this information. Your College Bound Kid is produced by Jon Marcus. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Artwork is by Andrea Togo. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. If you want to get a copy of the book 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340.
And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like for us to answer on the show, please email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. That's questions with an S at yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions, so send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, which is just simply yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.